This is the Concept Attainment Model by Robin Bortsfield, Teresa Pasiti, Brittany Payne, and Allison Thurston. My name is Allison Thurston, and I'm going to go over the Concept Attainment flowchart. A takeaway that came from making the flowchart was how hard the students are working. As we go through the model, you will see that the teacher is really just a facilitator, and the learner does most of the work. You can see that the teacher begins by presenting labeled examples for the learner to examine. It is the learner's job to compare both positive and negative examples so that a hypothesis may be generated. By looking at the positive and negative examples, the learner should come up with a working definition. In Phase 2, the learner uses the working definition to label more examples as positive or negative. At this point, the teacher will confirm or deny the student's definitions so that the student may then generate their own examples. In Phase 3, the student describes their thoughts and begins to discuss the hypothesis and the attributes they think the examples have. In concept attainment, the teacher gives positive and negative examples to help students figure out a concept and the attributes that make it unique. The students make most of the meaning, and the teacher is there to facilitate and help when needed. In this model, the student is doing most of the work of taking information apart, putting it back together to form a hypothesis, and testing it out. Do you think it is necessary for a teacher to be physically present to teach concept attainment? This model could lend itself to the learner being guided through a computer module. Do you think that would be as effective? Do you think the learner would get more out of a teacher actually being there to guide, facilitate, and coach? What do you think?
Hi, I'm Teresa Pasiti, and our group has been studying concept attainment during this course. Today I'm going to be reviewing evidence-based practice analysis in this discussion. As instructed, our group found 2 articles dealing with studies conducted for concept attainment. One takeaway from study number 1 was that, although the subject matter appeared to have been reviewed and studied by other researchers, the study didn't provide enough explanation or proof that would make the findings definitive of concept attainment. Additional research will be needed for this particular study to be viewed as more than just suggestive of the impact of concept attainment. Later on, as we'll discuss, in study number 2, we were somewhat surprised about the sampling. 94 female students enrolled in educational psychology and were used as a sample. It seemed that the sampling was chosen for convenience. Although the sampling consisted of both undergraduate and graduate level students, we believe there could be a bias associated with using only female students, although this bias was not addressed in the study. In study number 1, Concept Attainment and Adolescent Development, the study was performed by University of Massachusetts researchers. Researchers built upon several development theories and generated a specific testable hypothesis. Quasi-experimental research was used in this study. Comparison groups appeared not to be randomly assigned but identical. Each group consisted of 12, 14, and 16-year-old boys. Each group with a different strategy variable helped determine if the age group was inferior. We found it concerning that validity and reliability are not discussed in this study. The sampling consisted of 12, 14, and 16-year-old boys. The study targeted these age groups specifically. Subjects were matched on intelligence and educational achievement, so there was no randomization. However, subjects were all males and had similar IQs and could be considered biases but were not addressed by the researchers. Statistical significance in the first hypothesis states that 12-year-old subjects would be significantly inferior on all measures to 14 and 16-year-old subjects who would not be different. Implications of the study concluded that formal reasoning operations begin at about 12 years of age and reach equilibrium at about 14 to 16 years. The study did state that the actual practice of concept attainment can't be refined by using the study. Additionally, the study didn't include limitations of the study or any future options of experimentation. Research by M. Helder and Piaget back in 1958 was supported with the study. However, research by Hovland and Weiss in 1963 wasn't supported, as this study didn't find positive or negative instances within concept attainment that made much of any difference in the study results. An additional evaluation question that we had was whether or not there had been enough high-quality research on the subject, or has only a small amount of research been conducted. We believe that the subject matter has been reviewed and studied by other researchers, but this study doesn't provide enough proof that would or could make the findings definitive of concept attainment. We believe additional research is needed. Study number 2 was entitled Relationship of Selected Cognitive Abilities to Concept Attainment and Information Processing, and was authored by E. A. Lemke, H. J. Klausmeier, and C. W. Harris in 1967. Study number 2 was entitled Relationship of Selected Cognitive Abilities to Concept Attainment and Information Processing, and was authored by E. A. Lemke, H. J. Klausmeier, and C. W. Harris in 1967. This study was a joint study conducted by researchers from the University of Wisconsin and Illinois State University. There was a clear hypothesis stated. The study is designed to clarify relationships among cognitive abilities, information processing, and concept attainment. We believe the study would have more credibility if it had been peer-reviewed. A case study was the type of research utilized in this study with a treatment group of 94 subjects. Researchers were studying what types of relationships existed between cognitive abilities, information processing, and concept attainment. A battery of 16 ability tests were used and administered to all subjects. The study discussed validity but not reliability. The sampling consisted of 94 female students enrolled in educational psychology and appears to be chosen for convenience. The sample consisted of both undergraduate and graduate level students. There could be a bias within the study since only female students pursuing higher education were used, and this is not addressed in the study. The study yielded a low correlation between a set of cognitive abilities, a set of concept attainment factors, and a set of information processing factors. No statistical significance is stated in the study. The study actually produced more questions than answers relating to concept attainment and information processing. It suggests that information processing is not a unitary ability, just as concept attainment is not. The study also indicates that information processing is not closely related to concept attainment as defined by the study. We believe that, in this study, researchers opted to treat concept attainment as information processing. However, only a small correlation was indicated between the presumed relationship between concept attainment and information processing. Researchers weren't able to clarify the relationship between concept attainment and information processing. Findings indicate that these two concepts are very different. There is also a question as to quantity and quality of research.
I'm Robin Bortsfield, and I will be presenting a list of essential resources for concept attainment. Concept attainment is a strategy that encourages inductive thinking in the classroom and also encourages engagement and interaction from all students. The journey to concept attainment begins when students label, categorize, interpret data, predict outcomes, and explain reasoning. To commit this process to memory is to work step at a time modeling and teaching students how to think and how to organize thoughts. Identified by Jerome Bruner and Jacqueline J. Goodnow and George A. Austin in their book, A Study of Thinking, concept attainment is a strategy used to invoke inductive thinking in learners. Written in the late 1950s, this strategy has proven to be a standard when introducing new content. Students learn by identifying attributes, recognizing differences and similarities, and finally arriving at the topic of the lesson. Using this flipped method of instruction, students discover the answer to the puzzle with only minimal guidance from the teacher and no direct instruction. Students learn new content and a metacognitive skill for problem solving and independent learning.
Although there has been quite a bit of research conducted on concept attainment, there is not enough research involving the relationship between concept attainment and information processing to make a solid statement as to what works best. Researchers in this investigation were unable to definitively define answers, and we also acknowledge that there may be a bias involved in the sampling. In reflecting back on our takeaways from both of these studies, one takeaway from study number one was that although the subject matter appeared to have been reviewed and studied by other researchers, it didn't provide enough explanation or proof that would make the findings definitive of concept attainment. We believe additional research would be needed. In study number two, we questioned the sampling. Although the sample included 94 female students enrolled in educational psychology, and they were both undergraduate and graduate level students, we believe there could be a bias associated with using only female students, but this bias was not addressed in the study. And lastly, we would appreciate any comments on your takeaway relating to concept attainment versus information processing. Are there any studies that have been done that do provide more explanations or proof that could make findings definitive instead of just suggestive of the impact of concept attainment? Thanks for your time.
A basic overview of concept attainment is a great starting point from California Lutheran University. This document provides the premise for CA and ideas for adaptation and evaluation. Integrating any new strategy can be difficult, and the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development provides helpful advice on teacher planning and the use of concept attainment. As a professional organization, ASCD provides expert advice that supports teacher opinion of the effectiveness of CA. Ian Bird from birdseed.com provides a teacher perspective and provides personal insight into how to guide a concept attainment exploration. It was difficult for our group to find a stopping point for examples and foundational research for CA and feel that the longevity of the strategy supports its effectiveness. Please visit our Padlet link for more information and grade-level demonstrations and examples. Have you used concept attainment in your practice? This seems especially appropriate for younger learners, but for middle school and secondary students who are new to the process, what are the challenges?
Hello, my name is Brittany Payne, and I will be presenting the sample lesson that the Concept Attainment group found and modified during Module 3. This lesson was modified from an online source to address a key term related to an inquiry-based research project that students work collaboratively to complete and present. The major takeaways from this lesson include the process in which the teacher guides students to learn how to label, categorize, interpret data, predict outcomes, and explain their reasoning by working within the concept attainment model. This lesson can be used in an English language arts classroom for grades 5 through 7. The key term that students will be working with is democracy, and the objectives for the lesson are that students will be able to define the term and recognize its characteristics. This lesson may take place prior to students reading a passage or selection in which the ideas of democracy are prevalent. For students to be able to complete this lesson successfully, they will need access to individual computing devices. However, this lesson could easily be modified if technology was not available in the classroom by using physical Post-its for students to write their responses on. They would then take their Post-it and stick it up on a large piece of paper that's posted on the walls around the room, and then perform a gallery walk so they can view the individual responses of all of their peers. The end goal of this lesson is for students to work cooperatively with a small group to research democracies around the world and recognize their various characteristics and attributes. The research is then presented orally to the class. We've split the lesson into 8 different steps which walk us through how to use concept attainment in the classroom. Something that we need to remember about this model is that it does require some time and preparation of the teacher. The teacher must already have created the positive and negative exemplars that will be presented to the students. In the model lesson, the teacher can arrange the pre-selected exemplars using Padlet and project it onto the screen for students to view. As students read along with the teacher, he or she reads each set aloud and asks the students to consider these exemplars individually and without discussion. This allows students a few moments to process what they have read on their own. In step 2, students work with a partner to create a hypothesis as to what democracy might be. They reference the exemplars which are still on the screen before them and consider these types of probing questions. What do the positive exemplars have in common? What do the negative exemplars have in common? And what is different from the positive to the negative and vice versa? After students have had a chance to process their thoughts with their partner and kind of workshop the ideas as to what they're thinking about the hypothesis at this point, they turn their attention back to the teacher and a new Padlet of additional pre-selected exemplars are now presented to them. These are more complex and abstract than the previous ones that the students witnessed. Again, the students read along with the teacher as the exemplars are read aloud, and the student takes a few moments to process individually what they're noticing about these new exemplars. In step 4, students are asked to apply their previous hypothesis to the new set of exemplars. Students are guided through this process with questions like, does the hypothesis fit with the positive exemplars? Does it need to change? After looking at the negative exemplars, does the hypothesis still hold true? Students then meet and discuss with their partners whether or not they need to change or alter their hypotheses. In steps 5 and 6, students post their responses to a new Padlet so that all students can see how their peers came to understand the concept of democracy. The class is then asked to reach a consensus for a definition. Once the definition has been workshopped and agreed upon, the class creates their own list of positive and negative exemplars for the term. Step 7 includes an informational video clip that the teacher could show to reaffirm what the students were thinking about the term and add new information or ideas to their understanding of democracy. In the final step of the lesson, students work within cooperative groups to research democracies around the world and compare and contrast their characteristics and attributes. Each group is assigned a different country. The research is guided by the inquiry question, how do democracies around the world differ from one another, which sets a purpose for exploration. As students find information about their country, they highlight traits that match the definition the class agreed to and take note of alternative attributes that had not been previously discussed. Each group shares their findings with the class. After all groups have shared, the class goes back to Padlet again to create additional positive and negative exemplars based on what they've learned about various democracies. The students will review the class definition and modify it as needed to reflect a sound understanding of the term democracy. Throughout this lesson, students are asked to create meaning and gain understanding of a key term without having the definition handed to them or looking it up in a dictionary or in the glossary at the back of a textbook. They view examples which show what democracy is and what it is not, and come to a conclusion based upon comparable attributes. As they view the various examples, they search for common threads or patterns that are evident and reflect their prior thought process and revise and modify their understanding as needed. The teacher guides the students through the labeling, categorizing, interpretation, and explanation of their reasoning. It is through the use of concept attainment that students come to a deep understanding of a particular concept because they search for, find, and create their own denotation and connotation of the term. This results in a deeper understanding of the new learning material. So here's something to consider. How would you use concept attainment in your own classroom? This model seems to work very well within core subjects, but what if you don't teach a core subject? How could you make this model and strategy beneficial for your students and a meaningful learning experience in your classroom? Hello, my name's Brittany Payne, and I will be presenting the bumper sticker that our group created for Concept Attainment in Module 6. Our group found this task to be interesting as it really forced us to look at the core concepts within our model. Beyond looking at exemplars and negative attributes, concept attainment requires the student to find the pattern of similarities and to distinguish the concept and its meaning. Essentially, they start with many possibilities and narrow it down to one that is seen in all of the exemplars. Our slogan of choice for the bumper sticker was, "And then there was one," as this represents a threshold concept of the model. The image behind the slogan with the single bowling pin was chosen to serve as a metaphor for this concept. When bowling, the ultimate goal is to knock down all the pins or to get a strike. We know from experience that more often than not, one simply doesn't roll strikes without practice and a couple spares along the way. While a spare may be frustrating to an experienced bowler, it's a positive experience for a student using the concept attainment model. To only have one possibility left standing reflects the process of elimination that the student goes through as he or she tries to make meaning within the model. Our slogan, "And then there was one," reflects the idea that the student has figured out what the concept is and can explain it successfully to others.